From Aotea Great Barrier Island, Aotearoa New Zealand, welcome to Small Island Big Ideas, an ongoing festival of conversations and events created to take Aotea Great Barrier Island and possibly the world forward. I'm Tim Higham.
And I'm Sandy Burgham, and together with our friend Bree Biederman, we are the Small Island Big Ideas team. It's 2024, and Small Island Big Ideas is going global. Thanks to input from many of those in our own community, we've scoured the globe to find other small islands, similar in size to our own, who've had a big idea that has led to some sort of radical reinvention.
We're interested in how other small islands are facing the future. How have they acted on a big idea that's transformed their island community in a positive way? We'll be sharing those conversations and learnings on this podcast over the next few months, one small island at a time. So let's get started. Arranmore Island is located about 5 kilometres off the northwestern shore of Ireland in County Donegal. This tiny island is 22 square kilometres and has about 500 permanent residents. It's a 20-minute ferry journey from the mainland. It has struggled for many years with an ageing demographic and depopulation. But in 2015, they set up a voluntary community council to try to mobilise action.
Our guest, Adrian Begley, sits on this community council and has been instrumental in what can be considered a digital transformation. He's here with us today to share how technology was key in reviving their island community. Adrian, it's nice to meet you. So you're the chair of the Arranmore Island Community Council.
That's correct, yep.
That's what we need, Tim, a community council. So nice to meet you. I'm Sandy. Obviously, this is Tim. Hey, we loved the briefing notes. What a story. And maybe if we could start this conversation, if you could tell us a little bit about the island and the issues that it was facing that led to the transformation, and we'll take the conversation from there.
Okay. Well, Arranmore Island is an island. It's off the northwest coast of Donegal, the west coast of Donegal, which is the northwest of Ireland. We are 3 miles, 5 kilometres out into the sea. We don't have a bridge. Our island is served by 2 ferry services, 2 roll-on, roll-off ferry services. We have a population when we started this project, we had a population of about 450 people. The reason that we ended up with an island council is because we had noticed that the population was starting to dwindle. The demographics weren't sustainable. We had a population of, I think it was about 45% of the population were over the age of 65. Yeah. So that wasn't really sustainable, particularly because we didn't have any young families on the island. This is in some way due to the fact that we have a lot of forced emigration, as I would term it, because a lot of young people have to leave in search of work. It used to be where people would have went away maybe to work overseas in things like the taddy hoking, as they used to call it, potato picking in Scotland. We also would have had people going away to work in the tunnels, started in the hydro schemes in Scotland as well. But our traditional industries here on the island would have been fishing and farming. But throughout the years, successive policies and whatnot have made that industry very difficult to work in. And that in and of itself is a battle that islanders continue to fight for with regards to fishing rights and being able to make that an industry where people can still work in. However, young people, wanted to go away as well, and we would never stop anybody wanting to spread their wings. We appreciate that the world's a big place, and it's good to see that people get away and come back. However, coming back has always been difficult as well, even for those who went away at a choice, because we didn't necessarily have in more recent times these employment opportunities like fishing, like farming.
Yeah.
And we don't have any other real sort of industry on the island. And what we were looking at was, as a community, the possibility of successive years, successive decades, dwindling the population because of these problems. And as islands go, you know yourself, time by time, it'll get to a point where there aren't that many people left on the island to make it a sustainable place to live. So we had a number of community meetings. We held a few discussions on what would be the next steps forward, and the suggestion was made that we have an island council where islanders can sort of speak on behalf of the community. We do have some very good and some very busy community organisations on the island. We have things such as we have a community centre on the island where a lot of educational programs and activities for young people are operated out of. We also do health programs in there, but we also have a cooperative on the island. It was started off as a builders cooperative, and it now looks after things like tourism and infrastructure. However, a separate body was considered that would be a body to be an interlocutor between the community and the state, and the things that we needed to try and make the island more sustainable as a place to live. Maybe if I give a very brief sort of overview of how the community council was formed, it was basically what we did was we had a steering committee who held an election, and the way you voted on the election was you were given a sheet of paper and you could vote for 5 people from the community who you felt would represent you best. And anybody who was on the electoral roll on the island could vote for anybody on the electoral roll on the island. Right. And nobody was allowed to canvass. So there was nobody put their hand up and say, I'll be on the council. So the community had the final say, and it was sort of direct democracy. And from that, the people who were at the top of the list were then all contacted and asked, did they want to be on the council, because the community wanted them. So this is how the council was formed. And because it was formed over the issue of depopulation, that is the thing that we focused on with regards to an effort and a project that we needed to work on as a collective group. So we put wheels in motion. I think it would have been 2016, where we, towards the end of the year, I think we got to asking ourselves, what would be the most important thing with regards to getting people home. What was the barrier? And we didn't really know, because we're living here, and it's easy for us to see all of the benefits and the good things because we're obviously staying here. However, the diaspora were the people that we reached out to. They were the people who we asked the questions of. We surveyed. We've a huge diaspora spread all over the world, particularly in England and Scotland and America. We would have the majority of our diaspora, but we also have a lot of them in Australia and various different places in Europe. But we all know each other. We all stick together. We're all very sort of clannish. Yeah. So everyone knows each other well. So we sent out a survey to the community overseas and asked them what would they need to move back. What would be the thing that's stopping them from moving home? And we gave a list of sort of things that we thought might be a problem, and we also asked them to give their contribution to what they think is a problem. The 2 things that came at the top of that list were connectivity and employment opportunities. They're the things that were stopping people from moving back to Arranmore. And we've seen that particularly in the younger community and the younger generation who are away, people who have gone away to university, people who might be second generation Arranmore who are living away. And we asked them, if you could come back, if we had these things fixed, would you come back? Yeah. And we had about 20 people in that survey expressed an interest in wanting to move back. They all had young families. They all, said that yes, if things were perfect, we would consider moving back. So we thought, right, we need to put something in action here to try and fix this.
Can I ask? actually, Adrian, just ask, so was connectivity, which is like really decent high-speed internet, presumably, was that on your list? Was that were you surprised about that, or was that even on your list, or what?
No, we weren't really surprised. Seamus, who's the secretary of the Island Council, who was unfortunately able to join us today, had already been looking at this for a number of years, with regards to what sort of problems not having connectivity raises, and what solutions it might bring to the community for problems that we face. And when we were coming into this problem, we had already sort of thought about what would be a gold standard for connectivity, and it was fiber, a subsea fiber cable, and that's always been our gold standard. But it's a very difficult thing to do, particularly given the geography, given the fact we are 3 miles out into the Atlantic Ocean. It's not an easy task, but it's not an insurmountable task. So it is something that can be fixed. However, in that meeting, when we looked at the results back from the diaspora, we decided to launch a campaign to try and get 3 families back to the island. I think it was between 5 and 3 families that we aimed for anyway. So we decided to sort of get in touch with people, who was the part of the most likely candidates, what could be put in place for them to try and encourage them to come home.
So you actually identified the families?
Well, not really, no. What we did was we realized that there were some people who were probably more in a position to come back than others, but we didn't really sort of say, right, we're going to focus on these guys. Keeping in touch with those people helped us to try and figure out what we needed to work on, more than trying to encourage them to come back. However, as serendipity goes, that year we became aware of a funding application that was made available by the government, on the Department of Community and Rural Development, to open digital hubs in rural places in Ireland. And we put in an application for this funding, and we were successful. Now, the thing is that there was quite a lot of applications within for this. This would have been 2017, I think. And we put the application in, and it turned out we were successful.
So, back up the bus a bit so I can understand.
Okay.
So the government were looking to fund community digital hubs, which are community working spaces with really decent.
Correct.
What's the motivation? And this is a basic question. What's the motivation there? Is that to revive rural areas? What was the government's motivation?
Yeah, I think their main motivation was, because remote work was becoming a thing, but very slowly. It was definitely not what it is today, and it was, I think, maybe seen as a solution to not necessarily depopulation, but certainly unemployment in rural areas. And if we had a place where people could work remotely or access remote jobs, then it might sort of improve the possibility of people being able to access work. The main, I think technology was also a thing that they were trying to spread across the country, with regards to connectivity and what they called, rural hubs. Basically, these would have been wireless access points in rural areas that people's connectivity would be improved.
Right.
So you might not be familiar with the geography of Ireland, but it's quite a rural country, particularly in the west of the country. And as you may or may not know, I'm not too sure what the politics are in New Zealand and how things work there, but the people on the periphery tend to be at the end of the pipe. The people on the outside tend to be the last people to get the benefits of anything that's being rolled out. We had been looking for quite a number of years of trying to find connectivity improvements on Arranmore before this became available to us. And we were trying to get companies to think about starting, the rollout of, say, a fiber network in the most rural areas and work their way back into the cities, rather than starting in the cities and working their way back out. because in doing that, that would mean that we'd have you know, as much of a shout, you know, of getting connectivity and the opportunities we get with connectivity at the same time as everyone else. And it was also, it would help them because, you know, if they can solve their problems here, as they work back in, it becomes easier for them. However, it just wasn't working, and people just weren't. We had spoken to a number of companies, but they weren't looking at it. We actually got fibre to Burton Port, which is our closest port of call on the mainland. It's where the ferry leaves from, and fibre came there. But we spoke to the company who were providing it. It was part state owned at the time, and they said they weren't coming any further. We were actually on a live call with the state broadcaster at the time who were reporting on this. And they came into the community centre, and we were having a meeting with somebody from the island who would like to move home, who would be able to bring jobs with them if they came. And in the middle of that call, the call went down. And this was for the evening news, and we were like, you see, this is the problem. This is why how important this is to us. Right. Interestingly, in the time of the survey, one of the respondents had said that if they were to move home and work remotely, if the connection went down in the middle of a call, as happened in that video with the news, they said if it went down in the middle of the call, it would be career suicide, which is, you know, it seems like a very severe thing to say, but you know, the more familiar we become with work, we start to understand now why that would be, particularly the industry that they worked in. They were working sort of high-end finance, so it was very important for them to make sure connectivity was good and secure. But the guys who were bringing it to Burton Port said no. That news report was picked up by a creative company. It's a creative media company based in Dublin, who work for one of our national. It's a private company called Free Ireland. I think they might be Hutchinson in your part of the world. It's a very large sort of conglomerate around the world, and they do a lot of mobile connectivity. And there's a mobile phone provider in Ireland called Three, and Three, their company, Boys and Girls, who's the creative media company, picked up on the news report, and they phoned me, and they asked what the problem was, and we explained to them we were trying to get a digital hub opened on the island because we had already been successful in our funding application, but our next step was to try and get cable to the island to open this digital hub, and they said that they had a solution, and they would be interested in speaking to the community council about a partnership where we would be able to provide the service to the community with a digital hub, and they would provide the connectivity. Right. So it was a bit of a new thing for us. It was a very large corporate. It was one of the largest companies in the country, contacting a little small community council voluntary organization. And we thought, right, okay, we'll speak to them at least.
Was there any suspicion or cynicism there?
Yes. In a word, yes. I think we spoke to the community. There's nothing that we have done in this project where we haven't gone to the community.
It's through the community council. Like, is
yes.
it literally town hall meetings? How do you do that? Or
well, what we had been doing is that we were, as an organisation, we were around about 12 members, and we would meet monthly, and we would discuss, and everybody would bring it back. And if any of the community wanted to know what was going on, they speak to the person closest to them, and they fill them in. There was no secrets, there was no behind closed doors, and it's kind of important that you have an open door policy with regards to what you do and the work that you're involved in, if anybody wants to know. We didn't think that it was necessary for us to continually update people, because that can get tedious. Both for the people who are doing the work and for the people who are listening. But if anybody wanted to know anything, we had no problem sharing. So everybody was in the loop with regards to what we were doing. And I think when word went around that we had been speaking to corporate,
corporate.
they were going to come up, everybody was like, whoa, hang on a minute, because we, as a community, I tend to find islands are a lot more progressive than people tend to think they are. A lot of that comes from people moving away and being worldly and understanding, the importance of business. So we had people, who were open-minded to what we were going to do. However, we still needed to speak properly to Three Ireland and find out exactly what they were planning.
Yeah.
So they came to the island and they had a meeting with the council. They brought a huge team with them. They had marketers, they had, the creative guys, they had the tech consultants, and we all came in and we sat in this building that we're in now, and had a meeting with them. And it was really their business end of their company, not necessarily the domestic supplier. So they supply also to businesses with regards to connectivity and business solutions for tech. And I think what they were trying to do was sort of showcase what they can do as a company and use Arranmore as a test bed to be able to go to their business clients and say, look what we've done here.
Yes, and it's a feel-good PR story too. Look what we've done. I'm not being cynical.
Exactly.
You can see where they're coming from, but look, just, take their
Well, you see, the cynicism I totally understood, because it seemed that there was going to be this, these guys were going to come up and make themselves look like the Knights in the White Charger, and they were going to solve everybody's problems, and
thank you, Bree.
Yeah.
So we've done it without Bree.
So we did think that it would be something to be cautious about, let's say. And some people in the community did say to me, be careful because these are big business and they're only in it for themselves, and I totally understood that, and I won't be behind the door in this. I had a bit of cynicism myself about this.
We were reading through the notes. I said, don't probe that. I said, don't be cynical, Tim. But you can see
you have to be,
similarity.
Yes, we have to be, because I think while I say we're progressive, communities are progressive on islands, we're also very protective of what it is we have. We are very aware of how important island communities are, and what they offer. So a lot of people are cautious about big changes and big steps, and I totally appreciate that too. So we spoke to these guys when they came up, and basically what they said was they were going to do a TV ad campaign on this. Right.
There'd be a TV ad in there somewhere.
Straight away, yeah. So
I used to run an advertising agency, so I was thinking, this is very similar. Exploit the island community and make us look good.
Yeah. Well, the thing is you can understand the cynicism.
At the end of the day, though.
Sorry, Tim.
What's that, Tim?
At the end of the day, though, you can have the great advertising campaign and it shows off their capability. But, at the end of the day, when that wears out, do you have to pay big telecoms bills? I mean, how does it go in the longer term? Can they get a return on that investment?
The thing is that we had to weigh up what the win was for us. Number one, the first thing that they came to the table with was connectivity for the digital hub, which is what we didn't have. And they were going to give us.
Had you been building a digital? I mean, that's kind of interesting. We just need to talk about. So you had a digital hub, like a state-of-the-art building that you were planning.
No.
Tell us about how that all worked in parallel.
Right. Well, so the funding application that we put in, we went for as much as we could at the time. We applied for €100,000, and we secured that, and we were also then given a further 25,000 by the local government body, the county council in Donegal. And all of that was 100% funded, so we didn't need to match fund that. So that was a big benefit to us. But what we had done was, I mean, I think maybe we were a little bit presumptuous. We were a little bit enthusiastic with regards to what we were going to do with the funding, and the majority of our funding went on a cable. That was, you know, because as far as we were concerned, that was the gold standard. So you know, I would say maybe 2/3 of the money was going in that direction. The rest of the money was going to be used for us opening a space on the island where we would, because we had plenty of buildings on the island that weren't in use.
Right.
And we went round and we did a number of surveys of different places on the island, which we thought would have been suitable. So we built a criteria list of what we needed, where it needed to be, and what sort of services it would have already in place to make our, you know, opening of this place as smooth, as quick, and as easy as possible for us as a voluntary community body. So we eventually centered on this place. It was a building beside the ferry terminal on the island. It's a restaurant which had a games room for young people. So we had a pool room and, you know, gaming machines, and there was bed and breakfast accommodation upstairs. But the people who owned the building had closed the business because they had got to retirement age, and they were, you know, as far as they were concerned, you know, maybe somebody new should take it on. And they had put it on the market.
Yeah.
So we contacted them and asked would they be interested of us being a sitting tenant, you know, while they rented the place, or they rented off them as a sitting tenant, and you know, use the place going forward as a digital hub. And we highlighted the room next door where we have, which used to be the pool room, not the restaurant place in next door here. So they said yes, they agreed to it, and we thought, right, it's a good secure building, it's dry, it's got electric, it's got light, it's got everything that we need. So we were looking at it from a point of view of a very rudimentary you know, upgrade where we would just put paint on the walls and some desks inside and plugs in, and people can bring their desks. Yep, it was to be very sort of, you know, it certainly wasn't what we ended up with, look at it that way. But 3 came up to meet us, and they seen the space that we were going to use, and they said, well, look, you know, we'll help you with this. We'll help you try and make this the best you can make it, and with your budget. And we thought, brilliant, we'll do that. So the discussion was, when we had these consultant guys in next door, that we would improve, number one, the connectivity for the building, which would be a point-to-point wireless lease line. So the wireless lease line is, I don't know if you've maybe seen the video.
Yes, we have.
Yeah, so as they explained in that video, you know, it's our own special highway for the internet, and it's uncontended, high speed, and more than sufficient for what we needed. But they also said that they would improve connectivity on the island because there's a mast on Arranmore, which feeds back to the mainland. So all of the internet providers have got, you know, a presence on this mast, and they beam everything back to the mainland, but it doesn't serve us because of just the way, you know, the internet works, particularly wireless or Wi-Fi, because it, you know, we're sort of in the shadow of it, and it's difficult for us to have good connectivity here. So they said they would improve that for us. Arranmore as an island it's very hilly. There's a lot of sort of uphills, downdales, and because of that, we, you know, do have black spots which are very difficult to fix. And we know that, you know, you can't fix everything, you can't help everyone, but the majority of the population would get good connectivity. And we were then hoping that fiber would then eventually come to help everyone. So that was another solution that they were going to bring. However, they were also looking at other things that they could bring to the island, such as IoT. So the Internet of Things is just like a low band sort of connections. And they wanted to trial a number of sort of solutions. They asked us what problems we had in the end as a community, not just about the hub. There was the discussion went far and wide. We discussed healthcare, we discussed education, we discussed business creation. and the difficulties that are in that because of poor connectivity. We also discussed things such as traditional industries that might be able to be helped, such as fishing. So a lot of brainstorming was done, a lot of discussions were had, and we looked at solutions, say, for example, for the elder care. So we used IoT solutions to help the elderly be able to have a more secure, comfortable living experience on their own. We have a lot of elderly people living on the island by themselves.
Expand on that, Adrian, to bring
Well,
life for us.
so we, as I had mentioned earlier, we have a large demographic which would be over the age of 65.
Yeah.
A lot of those people would be living on their own because their partner might have passed away, or just as Ireland goes, there's a lot of people might not necessarily have married. Families have moved away, so these people are by themselves. And we were looking at solutions that might make that existence and that lifestyle that they have that little bit more comfortable. So the IoT solutions that were put in place were basically there to give the resident a peace of mind, that if they were living by themselves, if something happened to them, someone would be able to check in on them. And some of the solutions that they come up with, the three came up with, were very innovative, I found. For example, we put IoT solutions into the houses. So we had door opening monitors. So say, for example, if the front door was left open, the IoT device will register this, that the front door is lying open. We also put in temperature gauges, humidity gauges, all things that are very sort of small and discreet, that wouldn't necessarily be, in their face. We also put in things like water flow meters, and a meter on their kettle. Now, I know this sounds a bit strange, but when it all adds up, it paints a picture. So, for example, the water flow meter would have been measuring if, say, for example, they get up in the morning and they flush the toilet, or they turn on a tap. That shows that there's activity in the house. Normally, the first thing people do when they get up in the morning is switch on the kettle. So all of these devices are building up a picture in the house for the elderly person of a normal pattern of behavior.
Right.
And what would happen would be then that this is being recorded in a dashboard by 3Ireland for us. It's all done privately. Nobody has any access to this. There was an awful lot of work done with regards to GDPR, and things like this to make sure that it was all secure. And we spoke to the healthcare centre on the island about who might be good candidates for this service. Again, this was only a trial. It was like a lab type of thing that we did.
That they're paying for. That they are paying for.
None of it was paid for. It was three covered all of this. It was all paid for by them. And they, as I say, they built up a pattern of behaviour for the individual that these devices would be in the house. And if the pattern of behaviour changes, for example, they don't switch on the kettle in the morning, or there's no water flow meter, and an alert would be sent to the family member who is overseas in, say, Manchester, for example, and they're told by a text message, phone home, just to check in, or there was people on the island as well who would have been a contact. So it was in some ways a safety net for people who were by themselves, and it allowed the connectivity and the connection and the technology allowed these people to have a safety sort of net that if something happened to them, people would be alerted. But it was done without any intrusion. There was no cameras. There was nobody watching them. So
if I can just go back a bit. So what I'm hearing is that you built up a partnership with 3, despite your initial cynicism, right? They helped fit out a state-of-the-art digital hub, which we've seen some amazing photographs of, which we'll put on our website. We'll put on with high-speed internet,
Yeah.
which allowed, okay, and so I thought the audio conferencing facilities looked incredible in the digital hub. And after that project, I want to come back to the hub. Then they started talking to you about how else they could help using the Internet of Things, etc.
Correct.
To the
Yeah.
digital hub, because one of the things that we thought on the island here, a lot when we're a lot further away from the mainland, a lot of us have, like for me, I work a lot remotely from the island, and I've had to get Starlink, right? And we're talking about how is it redundant for us, because most of us, if we're working remotely and we have to get decent, we're doing a lot of Zoom calls, we use Starlink. Really expensive, but we just, it's the cost of living on the island for us if we're working in that respect. But not everybody's, Tim, can afford Starlink, right?
Yeah.
So, and also I'm guessing that Starlink, sometimes it does actually go down, and it's true. Like, you don't, for a lot of businesses, mine's not as critical. You can't, for a lot of businesses, you can't have that happening. So presumably something like Starlink, not an option.
No,
Elon, he says, no, that's not the case. It's perfectly solid.
So who said that? What's that?
Elon, you know.
Oh,
yeah.
Solid. So I'd turn the question around a bit. Has Starlink not made your wireless to wireless digital highway redundant? You know, if you started again today, would you have just got Starlink?
That's actually a good question. I don't believe so. Starlink does work. It does go down. I don't think that it is necessarily any, it's definitely a good solution for people who are very rural, who don't have a connectivity. It's a bit more expensive, initial outlay. So, we have to consider as well that, it's not for everybody from a financial perspective. But the thing is that, definitely something like Starlink didn't exist, when we started this project, because I think if it did, maybe the conversations that we had with regards to people moving back might have been different. However, it wasn't there, and the conversation that we have, now today is sort of slightly different as well, because there's a thing about, I think, when you're starting a project in a community, that there's more to it than just particularly in small communities like this, is that when you are in, places like this and people are aware of what you're doing, it starts a conversation. More is going on behind the scenes than just opening a digital hub, or improving connectivity. People are starting to talk. People are starting to ask themselves, well, what is this that they're doing? Why are they doing this?
Wow.
What benefit is this to me as an individual, as a community member, as an island dweller? We did have people come to me, and to this day they still sort of say, that digital hub isn't for me. I can't use that, or I don't work, remotely or whatever. There were quite a number of people, we'll say quite a number, but there were several people that say in the community who said to me at the time, what's a digital hub going to do for me? It was to be a community project. That's what we sold it as. Everybody was to benefit from it. And people were trying to understand, what good is a digital hub to me? I'm a, 55-year-old individual living by myself. I don't have a need for remote work. Day to day, I go out and I tend to my sheep, or I fish, or whatever. Or, I'm a painter, or I'm a builder, or whatever. Lots of different people had things were saying that they didn't need it. Right. And so therefore, what benefit was it to them as a community member? And I was trying to explain to people that there's a much bigger picture here than just people who can work remotely.
Yeah.
When you start improving connectivity in a place like this, it opens opportunities that you didn't have before in lots of things, not just in work. So, I was trying to show to people when I was speaking to them that, And I'm quite sure, Seamus and other council members had the same issue in conversations, that it's not just about remote workers. Improving connectivity on the island also meant that we were going to have improved connectivity in our health centre, for example, and better improvement in the connectivity in the schools. This improves education, it improves opportunities, it improves how young people see the world and interact with the world. It gives the young people in Arranmore the same opportunities in some ways that they have on the mainland and in inner cities. One of the stories that people were saying to me, well, look, I work over behind the shop counter, I've got an elderly parent, what use is this to me? And one of the things that I was very keen on personally in this project was to try and improve the connectivity in the health centre for telemedicine. And I'm quite sure you appreciate the fact that these are so rural and away from main centres of service with regards to health, that telemedicine is a big thing. Particularly nowadays where you don't necessarily have to travel long distances to go to a city to see a consultant in a hospital, that you can do a 10-minute consultation from where you are. So this was the story that I was telling people as well. This is not just about remote work. This is about a complete change to how we are able to live remotely,
and
or,
it kind of,
live rurally.
I think when I looked at your 9-minute video, it's very much about positioning Arranmore as, it's more than remote working. It's actually, this can be a state-of-the-art centre. Why live in New York? You can live here and do whatever you'd be doing in New York. You can do it from here. I'm curious, because I know, Tim, you got the text from Lucy about the digital hub. So just back to the digital hub, before we leave that, how well frequented and used is the digital hub itself?
Yeah, and what kind of jobs are people doing there as well? Actually?
Well, the thing is that, again, at the start, I think the whole idea of remote working wasn't necessarily as big a thing as it is today. We opened our doors in this facility in April 2019.
Yeah.
We had a very sort of short window of time from when 3 arrived here at the end of October 2018, and by April 2019 we had the doors open, and there was a flurry of work for about 6 months of all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff, of rewiring, and as I say, you've seen the videos, you know what was done. But at the start, when we opened the doors, it was, I think, engagement with it, with regards to people using it, was tentative. People were very sort of, can I use it? Is it secure? Does it do what I want it to do? Am I allowed to work remotely? Which was a big thing. So when we first opened the doors, there were people who were immediately able to work remotely, because they were already in the tech industry. They were very familiar with being able to work wherever they've got a connection on a computer. We did have people who sort of seen this as a, and this is an interesting thing, is that people seen this as an internet cafe. It's not an internet cafe by any stretch of the imagination. It is a shared digital workspace, and it's an office, and it's a place where people can come in, sit down, work, at their own speed at a hot desk, and have secure, reliable internet. So they bring their own computers with them. So people were coming in. And I think when they were sitting down and starting to sort of understand what it was we had, Islanders started coming more frequently. But the time between April and June, the majority of the people who were using the space would have been digital nomads. So they would have been people who would have been holidaying, who had no connection to Arranmore, and they were coming in and using the space, or people who had heard what we were trying to do. I have to say that the TV campaign gave us a huge amount of coverage. It was ridiculous, the amount of coverage that we got. The ad, I think, seemed to be on every ad break for a solid 6 months. And to be fair, they made Arranmore look as beautiful as it is. It's difficult sometimes to capture.
What those advertising agencies do.
Well, you'll know. So it did make the place look really good. which is a good thing in us, because people will say, well, like, what are you getting out of it? Because these guys are looking themselves look like, as I said, the knights in the white charger. What's the benefit? Well, the benefit is we're going to be seen on TV on a regular basis. It's going to be great for tourism. It's going to be great for putting us on the map, and it did.
Yes, we want to hear about that, because we were interested that you were hoping, okay, so you had great connectivity, state-of-the-art digital hub, you were your partnership with 3, you were playing with the Internet of Things, and then you actually did have a call out globally to get people to come to Arranmore Island, or understanding that you were flooded with people wanting to come back. So
Yes.
tell us about that.
Well, I mean, as I say, first and foremost, our diaspora was always our target. And it still is to this day. It hasn't changed. It's important that our diaspora who have moved away see this as a place that they can now return to. As I explained earlier, this was not just about being able to make Arranmore a good place for people to come and spend a short amount of time. It's about changing how people see Arranmore as a place to live. It's about changing the narrative about what living on an island is and living rurally is, because people are saying, yes, work-life balance is wonderful, but I can live on Arranmore and I have got these wonderful views of the beach and the sea and the boats, but I can't work remotely, or I can't have a well-paid job. So that's the sacrifice. That narrative has changed now. It's made people think differently about what the island is and what it can do. So the diaspora was always a target for us, because we want these guys to start thinking differently about home and about it being a place that they can come back to and survive just as well here as they can anywhere else. And indeed have probably a better standard of living, because they've got a bigger disposable income. Things are cheaper. So
it's something to sell. Yeah.
In your video, there are a couple of guys designing high-end games, video games, working with London colleagues. Paint a bit of a picture of the, how now it's settled down, the kind of people that have come back. What are they doing? What do their jobs look like? And they're working shoulder to shoulder in your digital hub.
How funny. Adrian's internet is frozen, or is that my internet?
Probably Elon. He's trying to make
Elon. Oh my God, that is so funny. We'll just see when he comes back on. Adrian, your internet froze there, so you're not that connected. Tell 3.
What happened there? Do you know what? This is not the first. I think it might be a computer issue.
Yeah, I think 3 better come back and have it.
And everything was great. I was like, oh God. So sorry, Tim, you were talking there and I missed a bit of it. Sorry, can you?
I was saying in your video, there were a couple of really smart game designers working with their colleagues in London. And I wanted you to paint a picture of who else is working shoulder to shoulder with them in the digital hub. Now things have settled down. The nomads came, but the families have come back. What jobs are they doing in there?
Well, interestingly, at the start, I remember, just to roll back a little bit, you were talking about the campaign that we sent this letter to the open world. This again was a boys and girls thing, and it was them that sort of said, let's put the word out to say that the digital hub is now open. And if anybody in New York wants to work with somebody in Arranmore, they can do that as easily as they can someone a couple of blocks down.
An open letter. You sent an open letter, because we saw the open letter you sent to New Zealand. We're so curious if anybody answered. How did you do that?
Right. So I need a bit of explaining this, because I never get the chance to explain this, because everyone goes, why did you target these guys and not us? Everybody got targeted. The thing is that the company that we were working with, Boys and Girls, and the PR company that they had, reached out to all press around the world. I mean, if there was a newspaper or an online broadcaster or whatever, everybody got the letter, but it would just say, to that particular country. the thing is that not everybody ran with it. Some people did, some people didn't.
Oh, okay.
You know, Irish Central, I think, was one of the first to bite at it. And then there were other organisations like ABC Australia, you know, and the Sydney Morning Herald. Then there was the Washington Post, the CNN. Different people picked up on it.
Okay.
So there was a bit of a negative story had actually been put out. That we had reached out to everybody but England, which is not the case at all, because it went everywhere. And the Daily Mail got in touch. They asked us why we didn't want them. And we were like, this is not the case at all, you know. So it went all around the world, and you know, all of a sudden our internet started going mad with regards to people wanting to get in touch and people wanting to use us as a destination to come visit at least. And you're asking Tim about the type of people who use the space. At the start, as I say, it wasn't necessarily diaspora who were using it. It was people who went, this is interesting. Let's go to Arranmore and work for a week or a weekend or whatever.
Yeah.
And myself and Seamus were working in next door in the digital hub in the workspace. And we also had somebody from the National Bank working in there. We had somebody working in Jaguar Land Rover in their designing brand new cars that nobody's ever seen yet, which I thought was fascinating. There was a graphic designer in there, there was an architect in there, and there was 2 people from the national broadcaster, all working in that space in that one day. And it was such a breadth of skills and knowledge and abilities in that one space that I was fascinated by. Number one, you know, so many jobs being done in such a small space, first of all. But how I was watching how everybody was interacting, everybody was very open and very sort of friendly about, you know, because you're sitting, you know, 4 or 5 feet away from the next person. So you're going to end up in a conversation. You're going to start talking about what it is you do. And they could start to see people picking each other's brains about certain things. So there's this sort of organic
socialization. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So none of those people who were working in that space, other than myself and Seamus, were from Arranmore. They were all strangers. But as time went on, then word started to spread that the doors open, the lights are on, people are using it, and young people were coming back who had just started jobs and say for health insurance, for example, or you know, fintech and various different sort of places, industries that they worked in, and as you said yourself, Tim, people who are working in game development and app development, and they said let's use the space, and they were coming home, and we had this thing in the first year that everybody who wanted to use the space got the first day free. So everybody got a taster to see what it was like, and they came back. But there was other things that when I think back on it now, it wasn't just facilitating people being able to work remotely. As I say, this was a community project. It was about it came from who we are as a community. It came from what we do as a group of people who sort of survive together in a challenging environment where we do come together at difficult times. So, for example, people would be home for a funeral, but a lot of people traditionally wouldn't be able to travel because, well, I can't go home for the funeral because I have to work. But people were able to come home and they would work, while they were here during the funeral. And I know it's a very morbid thing to talk about, but those things are important with regards to keeping the community together. There, it's about making this place somewhere where, it's still first and foremost about the people, about the family, about this being a place where people can live and survive. But also, weddings, christenings, people were coming home and they were able to spend longer here. And this is when the diaspora started to bite. This is when the diaspora started to say, this can serve me because I can go home for a wedding, or say, for example, an interesting thing's Christmas. I always find, so you've got, a couple of days at Christmas where people have got off holiday anyway, and then they've got a couple of days off at New Year's, but they have to go back to work in between. Yes. So, people were coming for a couple of days and going away and not coming back, or coming for New Year's and not for Christmas. What was happening was now people were coming for Christmas and New Year's and working in the bit in between. So they were spending longer here. as Seamus has pointed out in the past, this is important for families. It's important for keeping the community network together. Young people are able to spend longer here with their parents who are working remotely. They get to spend longer with their grandparents. They get to spend longer with their cousins. They get to build new relationships, and those relationships that are building in the community because these people are spending longer here,
Yeah,
strengthens the community. It makes people want to come home. It makes people want to call this place home, and that's what this has always been about. So it's when you see people working remotely in a space like this, and the breadth of different abilities and different industries that they're working in, and as I say, we've got everybody working here now. I mean, we had someone in here during the summer. She's a partner in a law firm in Chicago. And
I would imagine too, like, I mean, Tim, you know what it's like, particularly when your kids are young, the last thing you want to be doing is working at home, right? Particularly over summer when the kids are screaming in the background. Just one question. How did you say, how much does it cost to work in the space? What do you charge the kids?
Right. Well, again, this space it's a community facility. That's what we've always seen it as. It's not for profit. It's run by us as volunteers. Nobody gets a wage. So we tried to keep this place as cheap to access and use as possible. So I mean, obviously we've got overheads. We've got there's bills to be paid. There's insurance to be paid. There's maintenance, just daily maintenance that needs to be covered. So we have got 20 euro per day or part thereof for a hot desk. And then for a week, it's 80 euro. That's 7 days. And then for a month, it's 220 euro. And then for the year, it's 2,200 for an annual space at a desk. Now, obviously, the more you use it, the cheaper it becomes. The place is available 24/7, 365 days a year. So it's people are getting a lot of bang for their buck when you can compare it to other digital hubs. But it's partly because as I say, it's a community facility. There are no wages in it, and we keep our overheads to a minimum as much as we possibly can. We even have a Roomba, who cleans the floors for us, so we don't have to worry about all the various different things that are entailed in the upkeep of a place like this. We are lucky in that we're able also but we've got different things in place. For example, for bookings. So if anybody wants to make a booking, they send an email to the Island Council. They get an email straight back. They get a door code, and the door code is sent to them, and I can just do all that from my phone anywhere in the world that I am with connectivity. So we can monitor the place with cameras remotely from anywhere around the world. We can, as I say, give people access to the space remotely anywhere around the world. So a lot of this is to make this place as easy a place for us to run as possible.
Tim, I wonder if we should, because we've got almost out of time. You want to talk about the housing thing, Tim?
Yeah, well, I was just wondering, like it's a great story, Adrian, and your days have turned into a week and your week have turned into 3 months. And I guess you've got a few families come back and the 3 months turns into a year and a year turns into a lifetime, and you've revitalized your community, which is fantastic. But housing, where do these people go when they start?
Our issue on the island. Yeah.
Well, that is, probably one of the interesting things that has come out of this project, because while we are very aware of one of the things that was stopping people coming home was connectivity and employment opportunities, we weren't necessarily aware of the other sticking points, the other barriers. And as soon as the world wanted to move to Arranmore, and there was literally thousands upon thousands of people who wanted to come here, we started realizing we didn't have anywhere to put them. We do have a lot of properties on Arranmore which we call closed up. There were the older houses which aren't necessarily being used anymore. I think we did a count one time. There was about 85 houses which weren't in use but which were serviceable and wouldn't take a lot to get people into. So all of these various different things started becoming an issue, or not necessarily been an issue. They were always an issue. They just got highlighted. So planning was an issue. Visas for people who wanted to work remotely and move to Ireland became an issue. All things that we started saying that we need to start targeting these as the next step, as the next problem that needs to be fixed. We quickly found out as well that it wasn't just here. As I'm quite sure you know yourselves that there's an issue with regards to housing people. We had people in Newfoundland with the exact same story that we had. We had people in South Korea and islands who had the exact same problem. It was very interesting that islands all around the world seem to have the exact same problems. And because of that, there was an awful lot of sharing of ideas and sort of solutions that other people might be able to employ. For the first time, it definitely highlighted a want for people to be on islands. It definitely gave us a platform to be able to say how important islands are to our nation. We always see them as a microcosm of our island, of our nations, and they are sort of a highlight of the best of what our nations are. And they're to be preserved, both from a heritage point of view and from a natural point of view. But the thing is that conversation about islands, I think, changed. While there was organisations always trying to fight for islands on Arranmore or on Ireland for years, things have now changed. We are, I think, for the first time in about it's certainly a quarter of a century at least anyway, we now have a national islands policy that's been updated. There are solutions in place with regards to housing. The government are now providing grants to do up houses which are either abandoned or derelict. So if the house is closed, you'll get about 50,000, I think, to do up a house to make it habitable again. If the house is derelict, you'll get 85,000 as a grant. So this has changed the ground an awful lot with regards to people starting to think, well, listen, I've got a property here, there's nobody in it. Maybe I could fix it up and use it for long-term rent. And long-term rents, I think, are one of the crucial things on islands first and foremost. Because it gives young people the chance to come back, to have somewhere to stay, to live, but then to use that as a springboard into building their own home and thinking about somewhere new. So we have now got families moving to Ireland or to Arranmore who have got no connection to the island at all, no connection to Ireland, in fact.
Yes.
We recently have a family who've moved here from Canada. We had a family who moved from Strasbourg in France. And they've no connection, and the problem is that they don't necessarily have a family home that they can maybe rent out from an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent's home that's no one living in anymore. They have got nowhere to stay. So long-term rents are very, very important for people like that if we're going to get them back. So I would certainly encourage communities to consider putting programs in place to encourage long-term rents, because people will always say, I'll come back, but I've nowhere to stay, I've nowhere to live, and they choose not to. And that's a major barrier because, people always like to close their own door at the end of the day. You mentioned there, Sandy, with regards to kids being at home and people running around the place and working remotely isn't necessarily conducive to that when they've got this noise in the background. So it's good that we've got a digital hub for them to come to, but it's also good for families to have their own door to close. They might not necessarily want to come home and live with the grandparents, so it's definitely something that we have highlighted as an issue, and it's something that we're working on. I think the National Islands Policy has maybe, and the grants that are available has maybe changed the thinking of people moving back, and people are now availing of that, and that's a good thing because again, that improves infrastructure on the island. It improves, just the logistics of people moving home. It's changed that.
Wow. Well, look, Tim, anything else, Tim, from you? Because I'm thinking we're sort of right on our allocated time. It's just fascinating.
I think that's fantastic, Adrian. I mean, we've loved hearing that story.
Such a different.
The long-term rentals, that's a new one for me. That's a really, that's that, and so you started off with one thing, your connectivity, then you built community, the families came back, and it's unlocking a whole lot of other issues, but in a way you can manage and grow through them. It's a fantastic work. Good stuff.
It's definitely sort of, as you say, unlocked is a good word, but it's brought a lot more new opportunities. The very first Oireachtas committee meeting, government committee meeting outside of our government buildings in the history of the state was held in Arranmore because of connectivity, and the discussion was about islands, and it was broadcast live, and it was, you know, so we have a lot of firsts that are happening here. There's a lot of things, you know, there's one thing that we've always said, and again, I said it in the video, that you know, it's, if you can do it in Arranmore, you can do it anywhere. And I firmly believe that of any island, you know, it's not necessarily you know, about what you want to do. It's about the will of the people behind it to do it. If you push it, it'll work. You need community buy-in. That's the crucial thing in all of this. I think that was our starting point, is that we had good community buy-in to this. We're progressive, and everybody wanted sort of to see the place do well. But yeah, definitely, I think it's brought lots of more opportunities. It's seen as a place to invest in. It is seen as a place. I mean, we have got fantastic facilities now that have been put in by the local co-op and the local government with regards to a lovely shorefront development where we've got a bandstand, and there's, you know, music events taking place there now. We've got 2 fantastic ferry services. We've got great facilities. You know, and we've got gyms, we've got shops, we've got. There's one story which is interesting. That there was a girl, the one I was telling you about from Chicago. The 2019, when we opened this place, she was working in here, and I bumped into her coming out of the shop over the way with a cup of coffee in her hand, and she says, I was here last year, Adrian, and she said, I was able to get a cup of coffee in one place. I can now get a cup of coffee in 7 places, you know. and I know that sounds really stupid and something small, but it was an idea of how people see an opportunity, and people sort of grasp the opportunity.
And absolutely, they feed off each other. Hey, Adrian,
Exactly.
I feel, you know, another conversation would be fantastic. One of the wonderful things about this project is that we are building a network for our island, Aotea Great Barrier Island, of other tiny islands around the world. So there's something really exciting about that. We are, I think Emma might have told you that at some point in the future, we're going to send you a little gift from our island to yours. I'm not sure if you're a gin drinker. You probably drink Guinness.
I'm not going to say no to that.
At some point, because we actually, like, you know, if somebody from the island is going over to Ireland or to Europe, this will be coming in the post in the weeks ahead. It's island gin. It's brewed off-grid, because we are off-grid. So, you know, we all got our solar panels, and we collect rainwater. This is made off-grid. It's award-winning island gin, and you're going to be getting a bottle in the post.
Well, you're very kind, and I would have to say to you, you know, there's, you know, we would be very happy to chat to you again. There's so much more, I'm sure, that I missed. That Seamus would have a lot to say about with regards to, you know,
tip of the iceberg. And you know, what we're doing here, Tim and I and Bree, who's our third partner in crime here, is that we're talking to, we think about 10 islands around the world. It's exploratory. So one thing leads to another. We're just feeling around, having these conversations. So I have a feeling we'll definitely be talking to you again. And just before I go, you know, one of the anchor points in our island is, of course, an Irish pub. Right? Okay, yeah, you can't go anywhere. Orla, where is Orla from? And where is she from?
From a small village just north of Dublin. I interviewed her last Monday.
She's a long way from home.
She was just back there for 6 weeks or so. She looked pretty great when I saw her the other day. But that's a central meeting point in the island. But I do think we need a digital hub as well. In fact, I think there is there's some hub. We've got something happening at the hub, right, Tim? And we did try and get a remote working space going a few years ago, but possibly it was a little ahead of its time in some way. But there's so much in this. So we'll be talking to you again, no doubt, in the future, Adrian. Thank you so much.
No problem. Well, I would enjoy it, because I'm quite sure that we could learn from you as well. No matter what we've achieved, you know, there's a lot of sharing to be done. There's a lot of learning to be done. So we could probably learn from you guys too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Great to meet you.
Yeah, lovely.
And you too, Tim.
Take
very
care.
nice. Okay.
See you
Look
later.
after yourself, Andy.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye, bye, bye.
Well, he was wonderfully entertaining and enthusiastic and funny and charming. What a lovely, generous man.
Yeah, it was great, wasn't it? It was a slow build, but yeah, so exciting, really. What it catalyzed in the end. Yeah.
Yeah, what did you pick up?
I
Excited.
was, first of all, fascinated by the idea of a diaspora, because, of course, we've got a massive diaspora from this island. And the idea that, like they did, they asked all the old boys and girls of their island what would bring them back. I reckon we should think about doing that.
That was
Because
really
we shouldn't assume, what they wish for. And yeah, I mean, they came up with connectivity and jobs, which I guess isn't surprising, but might throw up a few other things as well. What do you reckon?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I mean, of course, housing. I mean, our house. I mean, the lovely problem to have 85 a housing stock of 85 houses that are actually, livable, but need a bit of a touch up. That's a nice problem to have. We don't have that. I'm sure housing would be the first thing, but still, the thing I picked up, I thought the community council was a very interesting idea, because when you look at the local board who are mandated to do different things, I thought there was some role for a different type of. I mean, we don't need another meeting, maybe. I thought there was something in that, and I thought to facilitate conversations. I liked, it was interesting that the conversation about the corporate sponsor. I mean, you can totally see there's so much going for the corporate sponsor, and they could milk it for all the PR value, but still there's a lot, I think it's a win-win in some ways.
Yeah. It was interesting too, wasn't it? At the end, he did tell us the real cost,
Yes.
and it was still real money. You have to be earning a wage to pay you €80 was it a week? I mean, it wasn't insignificant.
No.
So my understanding is that this has been looked at on this island, and I think Taryn was behind an early initiative. I remember seeing some ads for it of a shared working space in Trifina. And maybe COVID got in the way, the time wasn't right. But I also had a quick conversation with Nikki Watts from the Education Trust, and they're quite keen to more fully utilise the Learning Hub, which is used by the students on Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. But really interestingly, the mums that are dropping their kids off at the Early Childhood Education Centre are being encouraged to use the hub, and they can do all kinds of things there while the kids are doing their thing. And then there's Monday free. So a little bit like their story, we have got a little bit of infrastructure that perhaps could be more fully utilised in a shared work kind of space.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting in terms of people holidaying over here, right? Let's say, you've taken the kids, or there's an extended family over here, and one of the adults has to go back to work, but they sort of don't have to go back to, they don't have to go back to Wellington, Auckland, or whatever. They could still stay on the island, right?
Okay.
Extend their stay. I thought that was interesting. Extend their stay and just go and work at the digital hub. When the kids, if that was going, if we had a state-of-the-art digital hub when the kids were small here, I would have gone there, because I wouldn't have wanted to work with the kids running around. It would have been too distracting.
A few more parks and dailies and wees and nawakas starting to pile back into the island with these opportunities. It'd be exciting, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Well, I love that, because it was a very different take on, it was something completely different. So see you for the next one, which I'm hoping is Fogo Island, but we shall see.
Yeah, and it's exciting. Well done. Well done.
Okay. Good night. Have a good night's sleep. See you later.
Bye.
Bye. Small Island Big Ideas wish to thank our sponsor, Island Gym, probably the world's most sustainable gin company, distilled with Manuka bush honey and bottled in recycled glass right here off-grid on Aotea Great Barrier Island.
And thanks to our partner in crime, Bree Biederman, researcher Emma Ricketts, Aotea FM, Luke Nola and friends, and the local board of Aotea Great Barrier Island's Auckland Council, and the Festival of Adult Learning.
Is there anybody else we need to thank?
Oh, probably half the island, Sandy, but...
and Georgie, let's give a
Georgie,
shout out
my
to
daughter Georgie.
Yeah.
The crew at Aotea FM, Linda
Absolutely.
Rowe and Renee Freeland.
Oh, and everybody from the island who's given us the great ideas too.
Yeah, that's right. They keep coming, don't they?
Absolutely.